your housing in Groningen. I'm giving you hopefully lots of tips and tricks that will help you, but also some warnings. So the first one, we have our own on our own website, hanze.nl/housing, is one of the important basic websites where you can find most of the information concerning housing and finding a room. I would advise you, if you think this is interesting, make a screenshot of the slide so that you have, for example, the links that you can find or the tips that you can find, because this is not, these slides will not be shared with students afterwards. So hanze.nl/housing, very important. You can find links there, lots of addresses and web addresses, lots of additional information concerning housing and what comes with it, but also some tips and tricks on finding it, and some videos that will help you probably in your search for. We do have a preferred partner, SSH Student Housing, and you can register there at SSH. Well, a lot of X's and L's, as you can see the website. But do remember, they have a very limited set of rooms. So it's not like if you go there that you will be guaranteed a room. And in March, and not earlier than that, it will become obvious which groups of the students will be able to register at SHH, because not all of our groups of students will be able to find a room through this organization, simply for the simple reason that we don't have enough rooms for the entire population there. So SSH is a very good portal to go to, but be aware this is only one of the many channels that you might have to use to find accommodation. Another important website is athomeingroningen.com. Here you can find lots of general information on housing. So what kind of rooms can you find in Groningen? What kind of suppliers are there? But also lots of information about the legal and financial aspects of housing in the Netherlands. So things like contracts. But there's also a very interesting part in At Home in Groningen, which is a room finder, which is sort of a marketplace online where providers of rooms and lookers can find each other, and where the offer of rooms available and studios available is shown real time. And I'll give you a small screenshot. So so this is a room finder that you can find through that website. And as you can see, what's now available, because I made this screenshot yesterday, lots of independent units, but really high prices. It might turn differently in March, April. It might turn differently in June. So this is something you need to check over time. But be aware, this again is a limited set of rooms, and there will be lots of competitors for the same rooms. And not everything is found on here. And the offer, so the number of rooms can change drastically, especially when it moves towards summer. But again, a source that is very important and that you can certainly look into on a regular basis, as of maybe already as of today. So very important, of course, what do you have to pay for a room? Basically, if you have a standard furnished room, because most of our rooms that we have in our network will probably be furnished, and with shared facilities, so it means you don't have your own bathroom, you don't have your own kitchen, will probably be around 450 to 500. It can be a little bit cheaper, but that's very few. This will include all the utilities like heating, electricity, water, internet, insurance. These rooms are usually quite basic, and furnished does not necessarily mean, for example, that you also might have things like cutlery, pans and pots and plates. So make sure that you know exactly what kind of room you are getting once you have found one and it says furnished, because furnished is a very vague term that might have to deal with a lot of expectations that you think differently of a furnished room than somebody else. It will include things like a bed and a closet, but make sure that you know exactly what a furnished room is. Then you can find rooms in student houses that might have their own bathroom and kitchen or kitchenette. Those are generally more expensive, so you talk about 500 to 700 euros, but they include utilities as well. And then high end, you might find studios and apartments, and as you could see in the room finder, those are usually pretty expensive, and this says 900 to 1100, but it can also move towards 12, 1300, depending on the size and the location and the luxury of the apartment. So these are basically the three kinds of accommodations that you can find in Groningen. And be aware, if you get an offer for, say, like 200 euros, somebody telling you that you can find a room for 200 euros, and that is not through, it is not a friend of a friend, it could be that it is a scam. And scams happen everywhere in housing, everywhere in the world. So Groningen is not is an exception, not an exception to that. So if you feel like, wait a minute, why is this so cheap? And he says that it is okay and it is available, make sure you check with our housing officer, housing at org.hanze.nl, to check whether this is actually something genuine or whether you are being scammed. Because they will happen, not a lot, but you might be a victim of that one. And we don't want you to pay for something that you're never going to get. So, a few important tips and tricks. First of all, there is a huge competition in the student accommodation market in Groningen, which means that students who start late in looking for it will not be able to get one before they come in Groningen, and they might not even they will not be able to get one once they are in Groningen either. So that means that if you come here in September looking for a room, you might have to spend your days on couches of fellow students or in a hotel or somewhere else because there are no rooms for you. So if you want to make sure that you have a room, start early, really early. So I know that some of our students started in March, and they were also willing to accept that maybe they had to pay 1 or 2 months in advance, so that they knew for certain that in September they would have that room. So start looking really early. Um, the next is use multiple resources. I showed you the room finder at home in Groningen. I showed you that we have a website called housing hanze.nl/housing, but there are lots of Facebook groups where people share possible rooms or tell people there's a new room available in our apartment and we're looking for a fellow student. Look for networks. So, do you know anybody who's already studying in Groningen and might help you from their network and knows a friend of a friend? Look for real estate agents, especially the ones that are recommended by us, again, to avoid scamming. Um, and come if you are at a distance that you can say, I can spend a couple of days or a week in Groningen beforehand. That's also a good idea to go to Groningen and to visit physically with real estate agents and see if you can find a room that way. So make sure that you don't rely on only one source and make work of it. So feel that it is very urgent that you take lots and lots of time to make sure that your accommodation is okay. And don't be too high in your expectations when you come to Groningen. Lots of our students who have spent like 3 or 4 years in Groningen probably moved 4, 5, maybe even more times to finally end up in the room or the studio, the apartment that they really like. So if you have a room that you say, yeah, it's not what I really would like, but it is a roof over my head, take it. You can always change once you're in Groningen. But if you have that roof, if you have a room that might not be what you really like, but at least it's something that is for you and that you can start your study with, do it. So don't hold out because you think something better might come along. That can still happen once you are in Groningen. I myself, when I studied, I spent the first year moving 3 times. And finally, I found my really beautiful apartment that I stayed the rest of my program in. So make sure don't expect too much because a lot of the rooms are basic, are small, may have thin walls, etc. But that's part of starting in Groningen. And again, I can't stress it enough. There is a shortage. So be aware that for every room that you see somewhere, there will be a lot of competitors for that same room. So make sure that you are speedy, that you communicate quickly, and again, start on time. I can't stress it enough. A few things. As you could see, some of the rooms may be a bit more high end. We do have what we call the rent benefit program, which is a subsidy program by the government, which allows renters to get some subsidy for the rent. Um, Whether you are eligible for that one is something that is determined on a case by case basis. So there are some general rules, like you have to be an ER citizen or have a residence permit. You have to be 18 years or older. You have to have independent accommodation, which basically means you have to have your own front door. And neither your income nor your rent should be too high. So it is not like if you have something that is 1,300 euros that they'll tell you, oh, yeah, sure, you can have a subsidy because that is high end accommodation. But if you, for example, have something with your own front door, which is 700 euros, you might be able to get the rent benefit. So go to the website that it says here below and find out what the rules are and at some point whether you are eligible for that rent benefit. So last, if you receive a contract and you are not sure if it is okay, so like, meh, it sounds shady, or it's too easy, or I don't understand some of the legal language that is put here, make sure that you check with us, with the housing officer, to see if that contract is okay. They have lots of experience with all different kinds of contracts, and they know what to look for, whether the contract is legal and genuine and will help you. Um, Again, another tip: be very careful with with the offers that are on all the social medias. They can be okay, but it is also used by scammers. So make sure that you know whether the source in that social media is trustworthy or not. And if you want to know more about scamming and how to avoid it, and especially how to recognize it, go to athomeingroningen.com. They have a very interesting page on how to, what are the warning flags when it comes down to scammers, and what kind of things can you do to prevent this from happening. This sounds all like, oh my God, what is it? What do I have to do to find accommodation? Yes, because we want to make sure that you don't underestimate finding a room and finding the proper room with the proper price. But also, ultimately, most our students will find their rooms if it's early or if it's late. But don't let it scare you off. Just make sure that you spend enough time and energy on finding accommodation, because we are only going to assist. We cannot help you with the room itself. So check every box that I just gave you. And if any doubt about anything, contact us and we'll see how we can help you make sure that the room that you have found is actually the good room for you. So this is basically what I was going to say in my presentation. Um, And then, yeah, although I'm giving lots of warnings, I do hope once you get to Groningen that you will have a really good time. And of course, having a roof over your head, a place where you can spend the night on a permanent basis, is really a good basis of having a great student life. So we are hoping that you will have a wonderful stay. Our housing officer, Ria Visser, is the one behind the mailbox housing, and she's available throughout the year for any questions and concerns that you might have. So for now, if there are questions, please let us know so that we can help you along. And I saw a few in the chats. Do Dutch families rent a room in their homes to students? Yes, that happens. And again, as Santiago said, sometimes you can find them in the websites. Sometimes you can find them through the networks. But there are certainly people who are renting out private rooms in their own house. Can I book a room as I haven't started the TV procedures yet? If you go through private channels, that depends on what they are requiring from you. Most students, once they are finalizing their procedures, start looking for it. But if you feel that you want to start early, then the private market is your place to go to. But if you have already received, and Santiago, correct me if I'm wrong, if you have received your letter of acceptance, you can move forward depending on the country you come from, right?
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, yes. As soon as you have the letter of acceptance, you can start moving on with the other things and also finding an apartment or a house here.
Yeah. So as soon as you have that letter of acceptance, and if you have applied early, then probably you already have it, then you can make the first moves towards finding accommodation. Can we cancel or receive a refund if something unexpected happened before we arrived at Groningen? Santiago, I think you have an answer for this one.
It depends on what you signed. It depends if you have a contract with a private company or a private person, and you have already signed a contract and paid 1 month in advance, or the deposit you have to pay. That you need to check with the person that you are doing the business at that point, the landlord or the company that you are doing that procedure with. If you apply with SSH or other most student accommodation, normally you don't have to pay anything till you are here ready. So as soon as you arrive here, is that at that moment you pay. So let's say if you come only for a couple of months and then you decide to go back, then you need to see how your contract is set together. If I'm not mistaken, for SSH, you are allowed to leave the place within the first 3 months of your study program. After that, you're not allowed um, to cancel your contract anymore. So that's for SSH. But for other accommodation, you need to see, of course, the contract and what you have talked with the landlord or the person in charge of the accommodation.
So another question, do you need a residence permit if you want to rent a room? I think that depends on whether you are doing private or through SSH. Um, be careful if you are not certain that you will get the residence permit and you have to pay deposits. That might be a problem. And one thing we can generally say: don't pay a deposit unless you have seen the room. SSH is another thing because that is a trusted partner. But if you have in the private market, you find something and they ask you to pay a deposit without you having seen the room or having been physically able to look at it, don't do it. The chances are way too great that this is a scamming deal, and then you lose your deposit, lose your money, and you have nothing. It's not a problem to be underage for housing. The only thing is that a lot of people demand somebody over the age of 18 to sign contracts because you are a minor. So it does mean that you need, for example, a signature of parents to be able to move forward, because a 17-year-old is officially not of legal age. Any other questions? Okay, and that's because right now we are concluding our 20-minute session. Thank you very much. I hope we've given you enough information